Welcome to the Vision of Battle Training podcast. Appreciate you guys for tuning in today. Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Of course, you guys are listening. Everybody who's on YouTube right now. If you are on YouTube, make sure you drop a like, subscribe if you're new. New podcast episode coming out every Sunday, so be on the lookout for that. Also, probably already flashed along the screen, but my Instagram is at Vision Driven Basketball. Make sure you guys give me a follow right there, so you guys know when I'm posting. And also, if you guys have questions for me, send me a DM on Instagram as well. Like I've talked to you guys about before, on Apple Podcasts, anytime you leave a review, if I get one, I'll read it on the show. So I want to read two of them today. First one is awesome. Hey, Ethan, I just got to say your podcast is legit. It's helped me so much in so little time. As an aspiring pro player, this podcast gives me helpful steps to making it. One great thing I learned from your podcast was that I don't have to worry about exposure right this moment. Thank you for your contribution to the basketball community. God bless. I appreciate that. And then our second review, 5-Star Basketball Podcast is the title of it. Very good basketball podcast for any player who wants to bring their game to the next level. Covers many great topics from scoring, mindset, leadership, and much more great stuff. Definitely has given me a better idea on how to become a better leader and better overall player. Incredible job, Coach. Keep it up. Appreciate both of you guys for leaving the review. Like I said, guys, if you are on Apple Podcasts, go down and leave a review. Let me know what you think, and I'll read that review in the show as well. So that being said, we'll hop into it. Today's episode is going to be all about shooting, and specifically the kind of a step-by-step on becoming a great shooter, okay? And just to preface everything, it's simple, right? It's straightforward, but it's also like there's aspects to it I think that get overlooked. And for me, a lot of it's been trial and error. So what do I know that's worked for me, for my players, and what can I help to give you guys right here, just so we can kind of sift through all the other stuff, because there's so much information out there. Like, okay, you got to shoot this way, you got to have your form being this way, you got to take this sort of shot, you got to work this drill, but you got to only do it this day. And there's so much stuff for you to have to sift through. I wanted to kind of put everything, at least from my perspective, when it comes to being a great shooter, I wanted to put all of it into one podcast for you, okay? At least as much as I can. Obviously, there's so much that goes into it when it comes to like the specifics of, okay, what should your form look like here, what drills and all that sort of stuff. And I've covered that stuff as well, and I'm going to continue to. And I'll talk about it throughout the podcast episode. But coming up tomorrow, so those of you guys who are watching this on the Sunday when it drops tomorrow, April 26th, my shooting program, the Elite Shooter System, will be dropping, and it's going to go in depth into a lot of this stuff when it comes to workouts, form breakdowns, so you have an idea of like how to tweak your form, all these sort of things, film studies, IQ stuff, and some bonuses too that I'm going to get into over the next couple of days you guys will hear about. And so that's going to kind of go in depth in all of this stuff, even more so than we will today. But also, you guys look on my channel, especially the last few weeks, I've talked about different sorts of shots, like, okay, off the catch, what shots are important, off the dribble, shots are important. So it gives you an idea of what should you be spending your time doing, okay? Because I think one of the biggest things when it comes to getting good at anything, and especially basketball-wise when it comes to shooting, is making sure that you spend your time efficiently, okay? Because you don't have all the time in the day, and you don't have, your time is limited when it comes to how effective that time actually is, because you don't have unlimited energy either, okay? So your, couple hours a day that you work out better be efficient, because there's so many things that you could do, right? If you take time working on things that aren't really that important, then ultimately when you get to games, you're not going to see the results that you probably want to see, okay? So that's kind of been the point of me, making videos, talking about, okay, these are the 4 shots off the catch you got to be able to hit, so work on these. These are 3 shots off the dribble. And we'll go in depth into that as well today. So the kind of how I started it, guys, shooting is the most important skill in basketball. The number one most important skill. And I don't think that it's even a debate. In my opinion, shooting is the most important skill. I believe it was Bill Russell. I'll insert the quote right now.
What these young bloods have to understand, that this game has always been and will always be about buckets.
At the end of the day, the game is about putting the ball in the basket. And the ability to shoot leads to everything else, right? It leads to everything else being easier for you. You take a look at Steph Curry. You take a look at Klay Thompson or Trae Young. Like, these guys are obviously professional athletes, so compared to the normal person, incredible athletes. But compared to other NBA players, all of them are pretty average athletically when you talk about, okay, does he run fast? Does he jump high? Is he big, right? They're obviously athletic in different ways, okay? But when it comes to just straight up like, okay, what is this guy doing at the combine? Is this guy putting up eye-popping combine numbers? Well, probably not, but they're able to dominate despite the fact that they're not dominating physically, right? They're not going to dominate an NBA defender just because of their physicality like some other players can, okay? These guys have to rely on their ability to shoot the basketball. That's going to open up everything else for them, okay? Because Steph Curry can shoot so well off of literally at any time, that means that his defender is so much more on edge, and it makes it easier for him to be able to get by him, to get downhill, and obviously get into pull-ups, get into finishes, get into kicks for his teammates. All that sort of stuff stems from the way the defense has to play him, okay? And the other thing, watching those guys, especially you watch a guy like Steph Curry, I don't know if there's ever been a more confident. I mean, obviously this is a debate, but I think right now, especially as I'm talking about this, Steph is on a tear. I mean, he's just been going crazy. He's probably still averaging like close to 40 a game over his last like 10 games. Like, it's been ridiculous. The amount of confidence that he plays with is unbelievable. So, some of the shots that he takes, and that's what being a great shooter allows you to do. Like, your overall confidence in every aspect of basketball, it just completely changes. So that's why shooting is the most important skill, okay? And a big point that you have to understand is that shooting, when it comes to like shooting percentage, just a small increase or decrease makes such a big deal. It makes such a big difference in the outcome of games and ultimately how you impact winning, okay? So, you think about how often games are lost by like, 2 points, 4 points, 6 points, like a couple possessions, right? A couple shots here and there are missed, and that's what causes that game to be lost, okay? So if you score 78 points as a team, that would mean you need to make 39 two-pointers. And if your team shoots 40% on those two-pointers, then you need to shoot about 98 attempts to be able to hit that 78 points as a team. But now let's say that your team only shoots 30% to get 78 points. Instead of 98 attempts, it would now take you guys 130 attempts to reach that 78 points mark again as a team. So that's 32 more attempts that you would need as compared to the team that shoots 40%. So the difference between 40% and 30% as a team is massive. It's backbreaking, right? The difference between those two things. And so as you can see, a drop in shooting percentage makes things significantly harder. So now, in order for you to win, you either have to have way more possessions, which means that you're going to have to get more defensive stops and have the athletes to be able to run and be able to get shots consistently, okay? But also it's going to mean, again, you have to play better defense. You're going to have to rebound the ball better, and you just have less room for error. So it just makes winning and makes succeeding way more difficult just because your shooting percentage is a little bit lower. So obviously today's game basketball is all about shooting threes, right? So let's say that, we have two teams playing each other and the first team shoots 50 shots and all of them are twos, right? And they shoot 50% on those. So they score 50 points off of those shots. Well, if you then have a team that shoots 50 shots, but they shoot all threes and then they shoot 40% on those, well, they score 60 points. So they win that game. But the interesting part about that is that team that only makes that team that shoots 40% on those threes, let's say that they only shoot 34%, right? They make 17 threes. So that first team makes 25 shots, all twos. The other team makes 17 threes, right? Shooting 34%. Well, that team that shoots threes at 16% lower than the other team still wins the game. So if you as a team can shoot in the mid-30s, it's going to put you in a position to be a very good offensive team and much more difficult to beat because you can put the ball in from three-point range, okay? So again, this goes back to why is shooting the most important skill in basketball? Because games are won and lost by just tiny numbers, tiny percentages, a miss here and there. So the better you are as a shooter, the more of a chance you're going to give your team, the more room for error your team has, and ultimately, the more competitive that team is going to be. So the question is, are you that player for your team? Are you that guy who is shooting mid-30s, upper 30s, 40% from three? And if not, then that's something that you obviously need to be working towards because, again, it's going to make everything else easier for you. The defense is going to have to play you differently. The entire spacing on the floor changes when there's a shooter on the floor. Okay, and any of you guys who are shooters, you know this. You hit a couple threes, all of a sudden your defender's got to be a step closer to you. Okay, you hit 4 or 5 threes, all of a sudden you're getting face guarded. So Now they took a whole help defender off the floor basically because they're worrying about you. So now all your teammates are going to be able to get to the basket more often. It's going to be easier for them. And again, it opens up everything for your team and helps your team to be able to win more. So that's why I say shooting the most important skill in basketball. And today I want to I want to break down step by step how you can become a great shooter. What's the process to doing that? What are the steps you need to take to be able to get there? It's like I said, it's simple, but I think it's important that we lay it out. And like I said, guys, I'm going to talk more about this at the end, but the elite shooter system dropping tomorrow, Monday, April 26th. And again, so be prepared for that. I'll talk about a little bit more at the end, but I'll top into it right here. So number one, the first step to becoming a great shooter is to assess where you are right now. So you need to know, what are you good at already? Okay, what kind of shots are you already making? Can you already make? Specifically in games, ideally, you know that, okay? Where are you good at, right? Are you better in the corners? Are you better from the wings, the top? Where are you best at? What do you need to improve? So this could be what areas you need to improve in. So I need to get better at hitting threes from the corner. I need to get better at hitting threes, on the wing. I need to get better at pull-ups coming off of one or two dribbles in the mid-range. So you need to be able to have an idea and be real with yourself. Say, hey, what can I get better at as a shooter as well? Then the question becomes, what causes you to miss? Right? Usually players are going to have some commonalities when it comes to their misses. Like, some players will always miss it short, right? They miss their shots front rim because they always shoot it short. And some that might be because they don't put enough legs into it. Could be because they short arm it, they don't lock out their elbow, or they don't snap their wrist the whole way down. And so that's something for them to consider. Say, hey, okay, you know what? That's what I need to improve on. Is I need to get rid of those short misses. And then when I do that, it's going to allow me to get rid of the majority of my misses. So if you miss to the side, it's about diagnosing what caused me to miss to the side. Do I push my arm across my body? Is my hand placement on the ball wrong? There could be different factors that go to it, but the first thing is to identify what are your misses that happen to you most often. So that's going to help you narrow those things down. So then it becomes, what is the biggest thing that you need to fix, right? What is that one area that you need to improve? So if you know where your misses are, then it becomes what causes that miss and what's the number one thing that I need to fix. So I think the next step with that, though, is understanding what you want to be as a shooter. So if you're in a program already, like if you're in high school and you know the kind of shots that you get in your offense, or even if you're in general, it's again, there's certain shots that pretty much every offense takes. And again, I talked about in my last video, talking about 4 shots off the catch you need to be able to hit. Basically, all those shots are like universal shots, right? And we're gonna get in depth into that today as well. Those are shots that basically every team is gonna take. So can you get good at shooting those shots, right? That's probably got to be your goal moving forward. And but if you're a part of a team and hey, we shoot a lot of corner threes off a driving kick for this team, so I got to be able to hit that shot. Oh, we work a lot of pin downs. Okay, I got to be able to hit that shot then, right? That's a good thing to have in mind as well. So number one is assess where you are right now. Number two, the second step that you want to keep in mind is that you want to adjust before you rebuild. So with a lot of players, they're more so in need of a tweak of their form as opposed to a complete overhaul of their shooting form. Okay. And especially because a lot of players are playing year round, right? You're playing school basketball, and then spring, summer, it's AAU. And maybe a lot of players are even playing like fall AAU now. Or even maybe not fall AAU, but you're playing like a fall league with your team or whatever. Like players are, a lot of them playing year round. So it's harder to be able to completely say, oh, I'm just going to overhaul my shot and not shoot any shots outside the paint for 3 months, okay? And while that might seem like, oh, maybe I should do that, I think a lot of times that's probably more so than what needs to be done, right? A lot of times it's little tweaks that if you correct those things, it's going to allow you to shoot at a much better percentage, and it's allow you to be much more effective and consistent as a shooter. And normally with a few small adjustments, you can become a pretty solid shooter. And I think that what you want to avoid is falling into that perfection trap of like, oh, I have to shoot perfectly. Okay. I have to shoot like Klay Thompson. I have to shoot like, Trae Young. I have to shoot like Joe Harris. Like you look at these guys and say, oh, I got to shoot my form exactly like them, right? Everybody's biomechanics, everybody's sort of just natural movement is a little bit different. So you have to understand that what you do might be a little bit different from somebody else. Now, there are certain points about form that are kind of universal. And so with those, those are ones you're going to want to follow, right? For example, if, I might say, hey, listen, you want to have your dominant foot a little bit ahead of your non-dominant foot when you shoot, so that you can get some, a nice connection between your entire strong side of your body. There's no tension, and your shot just flows better. That's one thing that with every player that I work with, that's something that we're going to do, because just across the board, that's going to help you to shoot the ball better. But when it comes to something like, hey, you got to have your hand placed directly on the center of the ball. Well, for some players, maybe, but maybe for some players, they start their shot a little bit to the side. And just because of the way that their biomechanics work, they end up actually shooting the ball straight because that's just how it works for them. So every player is going to be a little bit different when it comes to that. So understand it's about doing what works best for you, figuring out what that is, and then adjusting things from there. Um, and when it comes to changing your form, tweaking your form, my advice is that you want to focus on one thing at a time. So if I know that I need to, adjust my release to finish a little bit higher, but I also need to change my hand position on my release, those are two things that are going to take a little bit of mental effort to be able to do. So you probably don't want to try and do both at the same time, because you might end up just doing nothing, right? You might end up going nowhere fast with it because you're trying to focus on multiple things. You end up doing nothing, right? That's kind of what happens. A lot of times you can get overwhelmed if you're trying to fix 2, 3, 4, 5 things at one time. It's way better to just focus on one thing. Say, I'm going to work on getting my release a little bit higher. Okay, finishing with my elbow above my eye every time that I release the ball. And then once that becomes a habit that you do, then we can move on to the next part of it. Okay? Or, it might just be a situation where you might spend more time working that form, right? So, okay, you know what? Hands are placed pretty well. Shot is going up. Elbow above the eye, nice high release. Hand placement's good on the follow through as well. Boom. So you were able to work those two things. So they almost kind of go hand in hand, right? When it comes to your release. But if you have a bunch of things you have to fix as well, okay, your shot path isn't great. Well, trying to hit all those things at one time, a lot of times it's going to be kind of counterproductive to what you're trying to do. So at that point, once you have those things down, then move on to the things that you need to affect next, okay? And like I said, guys, there's no one perfect form. Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Kevin Durant, 3 of the greatest shooters of all time, all of them shoot the ball differently. They don't shoot the ball exactly the same. So what works for one person might work a little bit differently for another player as well, okay? And so again, like I talked about in the elite shooter system, we go through form. Like there's walkthroughs, breakdowns on, what should your hands be doing? What should your feet be doing? What should your hips be doing? What should your release look like? How do you, what should your arc look like on your shot? And there are some like rules that are like, okay, if you follow this, it's going to make you a better shooter. But at the same time, there's also a lot of stuff that's kind of, you got to do what works best for you. And if it doesn't work, then adjust it, because there's not one correct way to do it. And that's a lot of times what it comes down to is shooting, is it's a personal result sort of thing. Okay. Can you shoot the ball 40% and get a shot off quickly against defense? That's ultimately what matters. And how you get there isn't really what's important. It's that you do get there. Okay. So do what works and then adjust what doesn't work. And don't think that you necessarily have to always overhaul everything, because it's not always the case. So point number 3 that I want to make when it comes to becoming a great shooter is that you need to cement in that form every single day. And the biggest key, and this is probably going to sound obvious to you, the biggest key to becoming a great shooter is the reps. So obviously, that's a pretty obvious statement, but it's worth saying, because a lot of times players claim to understand this, but they don't actually apply that ideology right there. The form that you shoot with is something that you should be working on every day, right? Every time that you're in the gym, every time you go out to practice, you've got to be getting reps up with your form. And this doesn't just mean form shooting, guys. It doesn't just mean like, okay, I'm going to work my form shooting close to the basket. Form shooting can be, all the way back to the 3-point line, honestly. It can be wherever it's from, but it's just working, making sure that your form feels good, that your shot feels good. That's where you start to build up that confidence, okay? And I think that working close to the basket in the mid range as well is one of the most overlooked aspects to becoming a great shooter. And personally, I can give you an example. When I was in high school, I worked out every single day, right? And I was always working game shots, coming off of different screens, working off of driving kick, doing all the different things, right, at game speed. And I was a decent shooter in high school. As a senior, I was I was decent. I was streaky for sure. Like I'd have games where I'd hit 5 or 6, and then I had five or six threes in a game, and then maybe the next 2 games I'd go 0 for 7, right? So when I was hot, I was hitting everything, and then but those times when I was cold and it just wasn't there. I think part of my issue was I wasn't consistent enough with my work on my form, right? I didn't just get in the gym and hit my first 70 shots coming from close to the basket and in the mid range, just working on making everything feel perfect. That was something that I just didn't do enough of. And the difference is now I'm a significantly better shooter now than I was when I was in high school. And now I'm not doing the amount of reps that I was doing when I was in high school. I'm not working out myself. I'm not doing game speed shots every day like I was in high school. The difference, though, is that I'm in the gym basically every day, whether I'm training somebody or filming, whatever. And so I'm just kind of messing around, shooting the ball close to the basket, form shots in the mid range, all that sort of stuff. And just doing that, just working so many more shots close to the basket and in the mid range, easy shots, has made my form so much more solid. And so when I move back to the 3-point line, when I'm coming off of movement, right, my shot just feels so much better and my form feels so much better. And I'm a significantly better shooter now because of that change right there. I think that's where the combination comes into the play. You have to have that game speed shooting, which we'll get into, but also you have to have the work on your form, which is close to the basket in the mid range. One thing I talked about last week in my video, actually it was 2 weeks ago, talking about 3 workout mistakes that players make in their shooting workouts, is that we were working on, if we're going to work on form shooting, I like to do what's called perfection form shooting. So we might start off, the first set is going to be close to the basket, like your normal first hash mark form shooting. And then we're going to move back to the next hash mark. And then we're going to move back to the free throw line, shooting jump shots. And it's all form shooting, right? Form shooting doesn't have to just be like, okay, I can't jump on this. It's got to be real slow. No, I can be shooting the ball at game speed, but it's literally all about just my form, okay? And that's where you start to build up that confidence. As soon as you start to make, you're making 40, 50 shots close to the basket every day, it's going to translate for you moving farther back. And that's what I've seen myself. I'm not practicing threes as much as I was in high school, yet I would say significantly better at shooting the basketball now than I was then. And I think that's one thing that I've noticed a lot. And now one thing I'm trying to preach as much as I can is like, guys, it's not just about like doing the thing, right? It's not just about going and shooting more threes. It's also about what else do you do that is going to help you with that. And we're going to actually get into another point that's going to kind of tie into that as well. But of course, there's other factors that come into that, right? I'm not just saying that the only reason I'm a better shooter now is because I'm shooting more close to the basket. Obviously, reps add up. Okay, so 3 years ago, I hadn't put in as many reps as I have now. So obviously, it would make sense I'm better now. But I think that it's a combination of those things too. So that's one thing to pay attention to for sure when it comes to becoming a better shooter. So number 4, kind of as we alluded to, step 4 to becoming a great shooter, guys, is game speed reps and game shots. So obviously, all that stuff said about shooting close to the basket, form shooting, all that sort of stuff, it's still crucial that you work on those game-specific reps, those game speed reps. And I think it starts with identifying what those shots are. Because another mistake that players make is that they just work on standstill threes and then kind of mindless one-dribble pull-ups. And that is their shooting work, right? They're going to go 5 shots, 5 spots, and then, maybe 5 shots, 5 pull-ups each direction. And so now but there's no sort of game-specific aspect to it. So it's just stand, catch, and shoot, right? Catch, one dribble. And like, I'm not saying that there's not a place for that, right? There is, but it can't all just be mindless work. There has to be some purposeful game-specific reps that go up. So, talking about my video last week where I talked about the 4 shots off the catch and you'll be able to hit, well, that's where it becomes shots that you got to work on. So relocations coming off of a driving kick. So when that defender drives, you relocate up to the top or down to the corner, whatever, just to give them a passing angle. Can you hit a shot coming off of that where you have to be actually moving a little bit? That's a much more game-specific shot that you have to be able to hit, especially because you're going to have a defender closing out at you as well. So that's one thing to consider, right? Also, shooting off of pin downs. A lot of teams will run pin downs where someone's going to set a down screen for you or an away screen. So, can you shoot a shot coming off of that? Going with that, if somebody screens or if you go screen for somebody on that pin down and they tight curl, they go back door, can you pop back to the basketball and hit the three right there? So, there's these different game situations that you have to be able to hit shots out of. And a lot of players don't work on that stuff enough. They're not working specifically on those kind of reps where they get into games and sure, you can hit a standstill three when there's nobody guarding you, but can you hit a pin down when there's a defender who's closing out at you? Can you hit a shot coming off of a driving kick now when you have to move a little bit? You can't just stand still the whole entire time. So that's why it's important that you work on those sort of things because it's going to translate better for you in games. And then when it comes to off the dribble, that's another area where I think players aren't purposeful enough with the work that they put in. So the three shots I talk about are one dribble pull-ups, two dribble pull-ups, and then shooting off of some sort of separation move. Okay, but also I think we can throw in transition pull-ups as well. So shooting off the ball out of transition because I think it's important. If you can, being able to hit a transition like pull-up in the mid-range is a great shot to have. Obviously, if you can shoot transition threes, that's pretty great to have as well. So I think those four areas are important when it comes to off the dribble. But typically when we talk about like one dribble pull-ups and two dribble pull-ups, this is where players a lot of times aren't really focusing on things the correct way. So number one, you might just be, again, like I said, catching it and just mindless one dribble pull-up. Where, okay, how does this actually apply? Because if you just catch the ball and you just go one dribble pull-up, the defender's probably standing right next to you still. Okay? Usually those reps, pull-ups, you're gonna get to a pull-up off of a ball screen, or you're gonna get to it off of a attacking closeout. So attacking that closeout is probably going to be a shot fake involved or a jab step involved or a quick rip through where you're creating space getting downhill. And a lot of players don't work on the two dribble pull up, which is actually probably a more common shot coming off of the dribble is getting into that pull up off the two dribbles. A lot of players don't work it, so they don't shoot it very well. That was definitely my issue when I was in high school. And I'll probably have to talk about this at some point, but I'm a significantly better mid-range shooter now. And one of the biggest reasons is because I started practicing a two dribble pull up instead of just a one dribble pull up, right? Because whenever you're in high school, so I was like, okay, we're gonna work one dribble pull ups because that's the only shot that people think about. But at the high school level, even at the NBA level, at every level, the two dribble pull up is much more common because it's much more versatile. You can do way more with it. I've talked about that as well. So that's one thing to consider when it comes to pull ups. It's like what actually is going to happen in games, what's actually applicable to you. And what should you be working on? So that's one thing to think of, guys, is making sure that you understand what shots are important because, again, you don't have all the time in the world. You got to be efficient with what you do. So are you working on the shots that are going to happen? Are you working those game speed shots so that when you get into those situations, you're ready for it, you're prepared for it, okay? And the fifth step that you want to take if you want to become a great shooter is that you can't forget about the supplemental drills. So not only should you be working those game shots and obviously working your form as well, but you also should be working some non-game shots, okay? So we can kind of bridge the gap between all this stuff. A lot of coaches and players too love to look at, a shooting drill that maybe looks a little bit weird, and then they're going to say, oh, when are you ever going to do that in a game, right? That's the thing. And you'll have, I haven't gotten this too much, but I'll look at coaches who I look at some of their drills and I'm like, this is really good with what it's trying to target. Okay, but it looks kind of weird, right? Because it's not a shot you shoot in a game. And you look through the comments, and people are like, oh, when would you ever shoot this in a game? You never shoot the shot in a game. Why are you working on this shot? Well, you have to understand that a lot of drills are not just about working game shots. Okay, you don't want to fall into the trap of saying, I only can work game shots because you're going to limit yourself in the things that you can actually work on. The qualities, the elements of a shooter that you can work on if all that you ever focus on is game reps. Important, not the only thing that's important, though. So what I call supplemental drills are drills that you can add to your workouts that aren't necessarily game shots, but are going to add to a specific part of your shot. Okay, so this might be, your balance. Okay, it could be your ability to identify the rim quickly. It could be your ability to get the shot off quickly. It could be working, your ability to get the ball to your shot pocket off the dribble. There's a lot of different aspects that it can work. One guy that I absolutely love his stuff is Rob Fodor, who's the shooting coach for the Miami Heat. He also goes by the shooting guy on Instagram and YouTube, if you guys know who I'm talking about. But a lot of his stuff is really, really unorthodox. and it looks so weird off the bat. You look at it, and you're like, what is this? Right? He's doing all this stuff where the ball's going around his back, and he's pushing the ball out in front of him before he shoots the ball, and he's doing all these spins off one foot into a shot and all this sort of stuff, and it looks so weird, right? You're like, what? It's again, it's like, when are you going to do that in a game? Okay, but that's not the point though. The point isn't to work on a shot that's necessarily going to happen in a game. The point of it is to work on the qualities you want to build out of a player. So one drill that he does and that I learned from him that I do very often with my players now, it's called the score fast drill. And essentially how it'll start is that you'll be under the basket, and usually there's a coach at the top of the key, and that player is going to sprint from under the basket to the free throw line, like directly towards the coach, back to the basket. He's going to catch the ball and immediately go with that, whatever the shooting footwork is, into that shot. So you might catch it 1-2 into your jump shot, or you might catch it off of a hop. And it forces you to do a bunch of different things. But firstly, you have to identify the rim quickly. Actually, before we can get to that, you got to have your hands ready early so that you can get the shot as quickly as possible. So as you're sprinting towards the coach with the pass, you have to make sure your hands are ready. And then you have to identify the rim quickly when you turn around because you don't have a ton of time. The goal is to get the shot up as quickly as possible. It forces your footwork to be efficient. So you're trying to take as direct an angle as possible to the coach. An angle you're probably never going to shoot off of in a game, where you're just sprinting directly at the ball and then trying to turn and shoot where you just directly came from. Not a shot you're going to take, but it's going to force your footwork to be more efficient. It's going to force you to effectively transfer energy into your shot, right? And it's also going to help you to be able to shoot the basketball when your momentum is not necessarily working for you. So it just makes the entire shot way more difficult. We can shoot a shot at the elbow and make it really, really difficult just because of the way that we get into it. And that's what the score fast drill does. And he's got way more stuff like that I think is awesome. So again, if you guys have not heard of him, just look up The Shooting Guy on YouTube or on Instagram. You'll find him. There's a lot of great stuff, a lot of great drills, a lot of supplemental stuff we're talking about here that he does that he's really, really great at. Another drill that I love that he was doing was with Duncan Robinson, and this was to work like his ability to like basically dive on the floor. I think there was like a game or practice where he didn't dive on the ball for a loose ball, and I think it was probably when he was a rookie, and that was like one of those things like, oh man, you're trying to like get playing, like you're trying to like create a lane for yourself. Like you have to dive on that ball, like you have to do that. And so one of the drills that they started doing, even like pregame, is that Rob would be at the top of the key, and Duncan Robinson would be sitting at the free throw line facing the basket. So his back was to Rob. And Rob would roll the ball in one direction. Duncan would have to sit on the floor facing forward. And as soon as he saw the ball on one side out of his peripheral, he'd have to get up, go dive for the ball, pass it out to Rob, and then relocate out to the wing for a catch and shoot three. Right? Just another like kind of unorthodox thing, but you're working that supplemental. Okay, I can hustle for the basketball here, make that pass, and then quickly get to my spot, and boom, I'm right back for the shot. Okay, and there's a lot of stuff that he does that's kind of like that. So again, that's one aspect of shooting that I think is overlooked, but very, very important. And again, that's where the combination of everything comes together: the form, the supplemental drills, and then the game reps, and then add that to time that you put in the gym, and that's how you become a great shooter. It's really simple, but I think understanding what elements go into it is super, super important. So the biggest thing with being a shooter, guys, is that, you know, when it comes to ball handling, you might be naturally a great ball handler. Maybe, you know, you were dribbling a ball, you were bouncing a ball since before you could walk, right? And you just grew up with a ball in your hand. So by the time you were in, you know, middle school, high school, you were just a really great ball handler. That's how a lot of players are. Like a lot of guys who are the best ball handlers in the world they didn't get there because they just did a ton of drills. They did it because they grew up with a basketball. They just, everywhere they went, okay, I'm dribbling the ball in the house. I'm dribbling the ball to the park. I'm dribbling the ball to school. I'm dribbling the ball at all times. They have a ball in their hands, and it becomes an extension of them almost, okay? As an athlete, right, you might be a great defender because you're a great athlete, okay? And that might just be a natural thing, right? You're naturally very quick, naturally really strong. You might be a great defender because of that. Obviously, you might be naturally 6'10", so you're a great rebounder, okay? But you aren't naturally a great shooter. You don't naturally become an elite shooter. You might naturally be a good shooter just because you naturally have good mechanics. But if you want to actually become elite, it takes work. And so everybody respects a player who they see, hey, that's a good shooter right there, because you know that that player had to put in the time. They had to put in the effort as well. because being elite at that isn't something that you're going to be born with. It's not something that's natural. It's something that you have to explicitly take the time, the mental energy to actually work on. And so, again, everyone can respect that player. And the best part about shooting is that anybody can be great at it, right? Anybody can be a great shooter. Not everybody can be a great defender. They just can't. If you don't have the natural like physicality for it, you're just not going to be a great defender. If you're in the NBA and you're 6'1", you're probably, now there is exceptions to that, but the majority of players, if you're that small, you're probably not going to be considered a great defender ever. The majority of the time. Okay. If you're 5'11" in the NBA, people just gonna shoot the ball over you. Like you're gonna be a liability defensively. And that's a lot of times why players can't play in the NBA is because they just don't have they can't defend. So if you don't have the natural, build for it, you don't have the height, you don't have the athleticism, it's gonna be hard to be considered a great defender. Okay. If you're not 6'10", if you're not 7 feet tall, it's gonna be hard to be a great shot blocker at that level. But anybody can be a great shooter. It just depends on your commitment to those three things: having great form, those supplemental drills, those game reps, and then ultimately the time that you put into it. Okay. And now, does that mean everybody can be Steph Curry? No, it doesn't mean that. But it means everybody can be a pretty good shooter. You can be a pretty great shooter if you're willing to, first of all, take the time to build that form, but then at the same time also put those reps in as well. Okay. So, as I've talked about a little bit, guys, tomorrow, Monday, April 26th, I'll be releasing the Elite Shooter System. And I'm super excited about this because of all the stuff that I've talked about. A lot of what has gone into this podcast is my same thoughts going into this program as well. So the first thing to understand is that it's going to be an 8-week program with a bunch of workouts to be able to work some of the same stuff. It'll start off with like a form breakdown, form walkthrough. It's going to kind of go through again, like, okay, what should your hands be doing? What should your feet be doing? What should your hips be doing? What should your release look like? Arc, energy transfer, all the stuff that goes into having the mechanics of a great shooter. We're going to talk about that, so you have an idea of that. And then we'll move into, again, drills. So a lot of supplemental drills to work balance, to work energy transfer, shot quickness, your ability to identify the rim quickly. All those things that are kind of overlooked as being important for shooters. We're going to hit that sub as well. Then, of course, the game speed reps, right? The working the shots off the driving kick, off of your pull-ups, off of different situations, ball screens, handoffs, different things like that. And we're going to work those shots as well. So, of course, the ultimate goal for me, from my perspective, is to help you become a great shooter. And I want you to be somebody who can confidently walk into a gym and expect yourself to hit shots. Expect yourself to go out there and put the ball in the basket. Somebody who teams have to, again, we talked about earlier, somebody who teams have to approach differently because of your ability to burn them from the outside. Okay? That will change everything for you, right? When you put those things together, it changes everything for you. And then ultimately, somebody who's a constant threat. Even when the ball is not in your hands, you're a threat, because as soon as you catch it, that ball might be going up and it's probably going in. So that's my goal for you guys. And again, once you have that, guys, everything changes for you. Your confidence changes, your ability to produce changes. And that's why super, super important. But like I said, guys, tomorrow, Monday, April 26th will be coming out. In the first week it's out, there's going to be pretty sizable discount on it as well. So stay tuned for that. And there's going to be a couple more details that I'll be sharing with you guys as well when it comes to bonuses too. So stay tuned for that. And again, I hope this episode helped you guys out, giving you guys kind of that roadmap moving forward. Okay, what exactly do I need to hit? What do I need to work on to become that great shooter? Because again, that's the most important thing. So if you're going to work on one thing, let it be shooting. Okay. Like I said, guys, Apple Podcasts, leave a review, YouTube, like, subscribe. I'll talk to you guys soon. Peace.